I got asked this in the Patreon Discord on how to make this system here. Right, with the active reload and the perfect reload. I thought, well, that's fairly easy, quick. Let's take a look. So, I think the first thing I would do, well, I would have a canvas, obviously, to put this all in. So we already got that because I dropped the image in there. But we'll make a new one just for this tutorial. Made a canvas, changed it to scale screen size. I'm going to take this one and push its order back so this one's in front. So we have a canvas and we want to make this. So let's make an empty. We'll call it the reloader. It really can be used for anything. It's just a timer system. Alright, and then let's make, let's do another one called visuals. You'll see why we do that in a minute. And by a minute, I mean probably about 20 minutes. So, we have this object. And you could do this with sliders and stuff. The logic will very similar, but I'm going to do like just images, right? So I'm going to take an image, panels, same thing, right? So now I have this here image, and I'm going to make that little box. Now I don't actually have a box. I mean, I can make one with a mask, right? And we'll make it roughly that same size. So actually I want this guy to be that size. So it can be 300. This guy can probably just go like that. And this one can now sit there. We know he's centered, everything's good. So, how do I make that a box? Well, if I really wanted to make that a box, and I'm just going to grab a box. I'll make it 2 pixels. Like that. I think I exported that to the right place. And just drag them in. Ba-doop. Cool, now we should have a box. We got to make it, we got to make sure it's a sprite. Alright, now I'm going to put that on sliced, and that. Oh, that's not going to work very well. It's not really designed that way. Alright. Let's just go like this. Totally forgot the edges there. Of course, I didn't export it right into the folder, so now I have to grab it again. Lord Thunder. Alright, that one should be better. Right, because, well, I mean, I will have to make this thing bigger now, but... I should have doubled up that line. Whatever, I'm not that worried about it. You get the idea. Come on. Alright, so this guy is 300. And he's zeroed off there perfectly fine. Now, what about this little box here? For this one, we're going to use, well, another image, and we're just going to use the UI sprite this time. I'm going to put him on, make sure he's sliced. Now, the difference with this one is whereabouts do I want it, right? Because this one has to have the accuracy with the coding. So the width. We'll make it 90 and say roughly 17. Gray it down a bit, drop its alpha, and the other thing I want to do is I want to go to the anchor point, hold down shift, move the anchor there, and then I'm going to hold down alt and move its thing there, right? Now I'm going to move this just so it lines up a little better on its Y. Now, if 300, if our distance is 300 for the width of the bar, right? And we're going to have everything normalized, so everything's going to be divided by 300. So where does this thing start? So if we want to say started at, we'll say a third, right, which is going to be 100, right? And this thing is 90 long, so it's going to go roughly 0.3 normalized. Point is, it's moving the anchor point over. This position divided by this width is going to give us that kind of space, and we'll see that in the math. We'll be able to adjust it. Right now, if I make another one, so let's call this one success, and let's call this one perfect. And the perfect one, obviously we want it to be a little better. We're going to have this one be much more solid, not quite full solid, and white. And let's make the sizing to be, we'll say 12. And we'll jump up its height a bit. Now, I want the same thing though. I want the anchor point and its other thing there. So this thing can slide over, and we could say put this one right at 90. Right, so this one's at 100. This one should actually be, I guess, 88, because he's got a width of 12. And it looks like we have a gap there. So I'll put him at 90. I don't think this guy is actually lined up very well. I didn't put that square in the middle very good. That's okay, not a big deal. Alright, so here we have those few things. Now we got this little guy, and this is the moving thing, right? So let's duplicate this guy, call him target. Now keep in mind, this has the anchor point and all that already set, and that's going to be important. So let's take this guy's alpha down a bit, make him half, but twice as long, right? There we go. So he'll be sliding up and down. And if you look, 0 is over here on the X. 300 is there. Right? So let's make some FSMs. I'm going to go to the root of this object. So let's call one target. And we'll make two events. Let's call one move and stop. So when this thing gets a move, what are we going to do? We want to set this one's position of the target space self on the X to 0. We don't care about the Y because we're not going to be playing with that. The other thing is, now let's activate it. Make sure it's turned on. And now we need a way to not only move it, but to keep track of where it is. So we're going to do a float add, which also means we need a set float up at the top, and let's do, we'll call it tracker, and we want to set it to 0. So these first three are like, I guess I can move it into a different state. You don't have to go into a different state. I'll do it just to clarify. Right, so first state, we're going to set everything to its default. Values at 0, position there, it's active. Okay, cool. Now what are we going to do? We're going to add a bunch of values. And we could add 5 per second, we'll say. We can add 20%. We'll play with that value. Right, now the other thing is we want a float operator. And we want actually, I guess we don't even really need an operator, do we? Right, because really set position of the target space self to the tracker on its X. Now we could clamp it to 300 because we know that's the width of our bar. And now we have that, right? So if let's go over here and put our events in the inspector, and let's hit play and see what happens. See how fast it moves and all that fun jazz. So it's moving slow when it started halfway. Right? And it should not be moving halfway. So we're at 29. That is maybe we should not use set position. Use our rect set position of the target. There, that one might be a little better. God damn it. Move to the bottom. Let's see if that works out a little better for us. You know what? I think that's because this guy should probably have that as well. I bet you. It's kind of weird. That shouldn't. Ah, maybe it should. Okay, well, yeah, there we go. Right. I mean, speed-wise, it's obviously too slow. We probably don't need the rec. I can go back to the set position, so I'm not throwing, you know, crazy new actions at people. So I bet you that one's not used all that often. So the other thing is, let's adjust the speed to like double that. Right. So now it'll move. Okay. So what about stopping? What happens when it stops? We need to, oh, we can do all sorts of fun stuff. We could tween scale. Let's do that. Let's tween the scale of the target, and let's go to like a 3 over, I don't know, 0.5. Let's duplicate that. No. Yeah, let's go like this. And at the same time, let's tween color. Of a game object of the target, value of that, or from current value to a value of that. Right, now this also means if we're playing with color and we're playing with scale in our default, we need to set that back to normal. We need that default kind of how it goes, how it starts, right? So we know the target is that, right? This alpha is, you know, about there. I'm not going to worry about getting it perfect. And his scale, well, they're all ones. All right. So, and those are over half a second. And then that one could deactivate. And then let's do this as a float operator. And the tracker divided by 300. Normalized position. We'll use that too for our score, right? So now if I hit play, right, we see move. Apparently I'm moving the wrong thing there. Don't want to do that. That ain't right. Right? So we say move, and we go through, and then we're going to want to stop. See how I got that nice little... Oh, we didn't set that. Could have sworn I set that. Of course, we use scale of owner. It's why you should use a variable for these. It just makes it easier. All right. So, I think the speed is a little off. Still, I'll jump that up even higher. And let's say let's also check tracker. If it hits 300, it's going to call stop. So if you don't touch anything, it's going to automatically fail at the end. I'm probably moving even quicker though, eh? You know what? Let's try 140. Yeah, that's a good speed, right? And if we hit stop, all right. So now we have that. Okay, cool. So let's add something else. Let's deactivate him for starters because he's not need to be open. The visuals, that will be deactivated from starting. And what else? When we go to move, we want visuals to be activated. And let's make a little manager, right? So if we get mouse button down, we just need some sort of input to come into the system. This obviously you probably wouldn't have it here, but it's not like I've built a game. I got guns and reloading things happening, so this is gonna have to fake that. So we hit our reload button, and what do we want to do? We want to send an event to the target to move. Right now, that alone is great. That's part of the issue. But that's obviously not the whole thing. So the other thing is we should probably turn this thing off. I don't think I want to turn it off right here though. I'm going to turn it off in another state. I'm going to put a little wait. It's just so it has that delay before it turns off the visual portions of it. So so now we have that. Let's put a bool in here. Why not, right? Is reloading, right? So if we fire off this event, let's just do a bool check, right? Is reloading true, or that's false. Okay, so if it's false, we can go here and more or less start reloading. So we should probably set that bool. Is reloading to true, right? And we can sit back here. Okay, so if it's false though, or no, if it's true though, sorry. Here, let's go like that. If it's true, then we're going to want essentially these same actions, a little different, but we want this to stop, and we want to set that to false, right? And let's just give that a whirl, make sure that's working. Seems to work just fine. All right. So we need a way to tell what the results were. So let's make another FSM here called score. Because we don't really want to screw around with these ones. They got things happening on timers and stuff like that. You know, fuck, we don't want to do that. So let's just say get score. So what does it do, or what does it mean when we want to get the score? We get the FSM float from the target, the normalized position. Now, we know from a 0 to 1 scale where this thing is along here. 0 to 1, right? Because we divided by 300, the width. The key is, where do we set this stuff up, right? Where do we set up this guy and their widths, right? Well, no, we won't do that. So we have two things here. We have the success, and we know his width is 90, and we know he's starting at 100, right? So what does that mean? Let's get position of the success local space, and then let's get rec delta size. Might be the rec. Let's take a look. The delta size also of the success, and his width is, you know, there. So we need some float operators. So the position divided by 300 and we would also need one for the success width divided by 300, right? And that will give us the success, because ultimately, if okay, let's put this here, kind of just sit there for a minute on its own. So this is where we get the success data. All right, so the normalized, or the score, that guy. If he is greater than this normalized, then it's going to be a six. Actually, you know what? Yeah, it's a he's a success. Like it's at least over it, right? But if it's over it, what if it's too far, right? Now, there's a few different ways you could do this to simplify this, but I want to make sure this is clear. So the other thing is if we need another float operator. So the success position normalize plus the width normalize, add them together, and that's success end normalized, right? So if it's, whoops, what am I doing here? We don't want a tolerance. So success and normalized. So if it's greater than that one, though, this is a failure. This would have to be equal or less, right? We're over here. If we're less, this is a failure. If it's equal, what we'll call success. This guy has its successes and failures. So if it's a failure, let's just run down here. You know, for now, let's go like this. And if it's a success, let's go here. Right? So now we have this get score. Right? So if we say false, we have is reloading is false or whatever. We can now send event, make sure it's underneath. Oh, we want this up here, not in here. We want it when we're actually stopping it. So after the stop, we want to, did I not make that get score? Oh, it is. Right, so we can now get the score. Now that's not the critical success or perfect or whatever it is. That's just for the success, right? And we should see that. Of course, it's not going at all. No, because I did it in manager. It's supposed to be in score. That's probably why it wasn't showing up. Right, so if we do too early, something weird about that. .86, 0.2, 0.2. .37. All right, so we know 0.3, which is fine. 0.33. .7. What? How did that end up over there? Oh, I see. I see. Yeah, see. Because if we end up clicking it prior to this, it's not doing the score. So we should probably I'm going to pull this part right out. And instead, let's move that portion over to the other side. Right, so we know it's called tracker, so we have to get it from the tracker. Right, so we want to get the tracker and the reason why I would normalize it is because, you know, if you have different weapons and you want this bar to be scalable, you pick up a pistol and you got like a certain area, maybe the bar is bigger, smaller, moves faster, whatever. Once you figure the math out for this stuff, then it's just a matter of plugging in the numbers when you change weapons. So, bloop, and everything fits in. Bloop, everything else fits in, right? I mean, this here was just a little bit of a timing blooper, I suppose you can call it. Right, so the scale score on normalized divided by the 300 is the score. Right, so now let's get into here. Change that to the proper FSM. Now that should be more dependable. That should actually work now. Except for a failure if we go beyond. Right, we don't want that. Because if score is great, oh no, wait, no, we do want that because it is a failure. If we go beyond that number, it is a failure. So we want to be in that. Well, it's working fine then. I'm crazy. Don't listen to me. All right. So now we would also need to do this same thing. So let's duplicate it. Only we want to do the perfect. Right? So we want the perfect width, and let's get the position of the perfect. The perfect position, right? So the perfect position divided by that is perfect position normalized, and then perfect width normalized. So the success position normalized, so that's the perfect position normalized plus the perfect width normalized, and we have the perfect end normalized. It's kind of like how thick it is, right? Because you have to add those together to get that number. Let's just branch this over here. I suppose we'll just slide it in there and just a little sneaky, right? So essentially we would need to do this same logic. So we already know if it's a failure here, it's a failure. It's not going to be a perfect. It's a failure, right? Except for the fact, I guess we have our perfect slightly actually above that bar. So we're going to have to deal with that. So let's just duplicate those. Only this one is going to be our, okay, so if we are greater than the perfect position normalized, then that's a success, else it's a failure. So if the success is right on this left side, then it is an absolute failure. Like that's absolute, right? And if it's a success, it can come over here. And this one is the perfect position end. Normalized. So if it's greater than this tiny little edge there, but less than this edge, if that's the case, let's just change these names. Let's call this, it is a perfect. Right? Beyond that, it's a failure. But if it's a failure there, it doesn't mean it's a failure. It just means it's not a perfect. So if it's on the left side right there, that is an absolute fail there. This little piece is perfect. But if we're beyond that, it potentially could be this success, right? So we're going to want to actually bring this guy down and do this one first. So let's move this guy underneath. Right, so we know if he's a failure, he's there. If he's a success, we need to see if he's within this side, and if that is a perfect, we can sit here. He's a perfect. But if he's a failure, let's go down here. Right, and then we're going to check for the rest of the bar. So if that is a failure, which this one should never happen because it's going to be based off of, because I mean this piece is here, and if it goes on this side, then this guy here will catch it. So this failure, I guess, is kind of more of just a redundant event, right? So actually this whole action is, but whatever. So we come along over, actually we could just delete that and just like drag down here, but whatever. Don't worry about that. So we're going to look at what is, oh, one second. Sorry, that was my daughter. She woke up and thought she heard her mother or something. So anyways, so here, if we are a failure, we've gone beyond here, then we're a failure. If it's a success, then we have a normal success, right? So this is our perfect state. Call this one success. And this one could be failure. All right. So now if we test that, I got a fail, fail, success, fail, perfect. Oh, I got it. Which, I mean, my pixel, because I'm using that UI sprite and it's not a perfect square, it's actually slightly smaller than the actual rec of it. So hopefully you have better UI images than I got. Alright, okay, cool. So now from there, what does that mean? So we've hit a button and we have true or false that we're reloading. Right? Now you can check for ammo prior to that as a filter, or if they're busy, occupied as a filter, or whatever the case is, cutscene or something. Okay, so if it's true, we've hit this, we get stop, and we have get score. So the score, this all runs instantly, and we can actually use those names to get our value up here if we want to. You could use an enum, you could use whatever, floats or ints or bools, whatever, right? But now we could do a FSM state test, or we can do a switch. This is just one way of doing it, I suppose. And we're going to look into the score. And we have 3. We have perfect, success, and failure. Right, and get rid of that finished. We don't need that anymore. And from here, I would probably branch into another FSM, just so we don't clog this FSM up in case we need weights and various timers or whatever the hell else is going on, right? So let's make another FSM and just call this one result. Right, and this is where you would, you know, whether it's a block or parry move, or who knows, it could literally be anything. Right, and let's just call it the same. So in these states is where we'd actually do our logic for, you know, like set the ammo in, set the reload animation in, you know, attack speed or whatever it is, extra damage, whatever the case is. This is where we'd actually do that. Right, so all we need now is a couple more events. So this one's going to now go to the result and say, I don't know if I named those. I did do that. Okay, so perfect. Success. And failure. Right? So if we now watch, we should see, right? And these are just going to be firing off. There we go, right? And so the other beauty of breaking it into FSMs, and this is really important, I don't think people do this enough, is it kind of allows you to not only have that much more crisp code. I mean, yeah, okay, we had to build 4 FSMs, but I mean, they're all relatively small. I mean, they're ugly and they're messy. I could have cleaned those up and made those a little better and more compact, right? But we have one FSM that is dedicated to just moving that bar, and it has that little animation state in it, and it also it deactivates everything, right? And it activates everything. It's just the visuals of the bar, right? We have one that gets all the stuff and does the math, and then it determines based on the math. We have the result, which, I mean, these could be whatever, but you would have all sorts of stuff happening around here, and they might even feed other FSMs. But then you have one that's dealing with the input, right? And it becomes much easier to troubleshoot if one of them is failing. So I think the only thing that's kind of missing is in here. You might want another one. I don't know if I'll bother building it, right? So we have this stuff here, right, where we get that normalized stuff. I said you don't necessarily have to do it the normalized way. You could go without the normalized and just go with the normal floats, I guess. But like I said, with the normalized, these could be dynamic, right? Because we could have another event here saying, you know, set up bars, and give them numbers, like the perfect needs to be from 0.2 to 0.25, and the success can go from 0.25 to 0.6 type of idea. And then, okay, well, 0.2, we need to set the position of the track, or what do we call it, of the perfect, to 300 times 0.2. That's its local position. And then its width would have to be well, 300 times 0.2, well, I guess minus that, so 0.05, right? And then that would give you that would move it down, and you would do the same thing with the bar, right? Its position, like a value, like if you want to start at, you know, 0.5, then 300 times 0.5, that's its position, and then it would be right in the middle of the bar. And maybe you just want it short, right? So it only goes to 0.6. Okay, well, 0.6 minus 0.5, you have 0.1, so its width is 300 divided by, or 300 times 0.1, right? So it'd be 30 in the actual width. But that way, like I said, you could have all these different bars, and then you could also have it alter this variable and have this speed to be adjustable as well, right? It's running at 140, and maybe you got a pistol and it's got a small little bar, but it only goes at like 110 kind of idea. So it's slower, but the areas are smaller, right? Or vice versa. Maybe you have something that's got like a big perfect range, but it moves really quick, right? You can mix and match it all you want, but that's ultimately how we do that, right? It's just the position, but we're based it all on this 300 width. It doesn't have to be 300. This could be a 200 width, right? Then you divide everything by 200, not 300. But their position, because all their anchor points and everything are off on the side, is what you want them to be. And like the normalized value is whatever this is divided by whatever this is. That's their normalized position, right? So it becomes a very dynamic little system, and then you can have this little reloader, or you can make various versions of this reloader as well, then not even have that math, just default value them in and have, okay, this is my reloader for my shotgun, build a different one for like the pistol and make them prefabs and just bring them in, right? That's another option too. But anyway, so hopefully that helps. Not such a simple little slider going along a thing. I mean, and you could use a slider. There's nothing wrong with sliders. A lot of it is the same idea. Like here, we're using a normalized value, which is 0 to 1, and a slider just happens to be 0 to 1 just by default, right? So that does work. But yeah, so this and this should be pretty bulletproof. The beauty part is if I keep doing it, it doesn't deactivate, because it has to wait for all the logic to run out. So with having the multiple FSMs, it's very stable. It's a stable chunk of logic, so it'll work well, right? It'll be dependable. So hopefully that helps.